So hi everyone, as I said on my Instagram, today I'm going to talk about BPD and my personal experience with it. Um, this is by far not my favorite topic of conversation. In fact, I would say it's probably my least favorite topic of conversation, but um, I don't know, I just feel like so many people are struggling with this, including people that I know personally, and to be perfectly honest, I have become very skeptical about current treatments that are available for people with BPD, particularly in North America. I'm not so sure about the rest of the world, but um, yeah, in North America I was just very disappointed by the way that BPD is conceived and treated by people in the medical profession. Of course, I'm aware that there is a lot of stigma surrounding BPD and misconceptions. I just recently even found out that um, the movie Fatal Attraction is supposed to, the main character, the main female character played by Glenn Gould in that movie is supposed to have BPD. So that definitely didn't help. And I was also aware of this stereotype of the crazy ex-girlfriend with BPD that honestly I'm not even aware of where that came from. I think it's also from like some type of movie. I think it's called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So you can imagine like just the amount of stigma that people with BPD have had to deal with for so many years, and it's not getting any better. And yeah, I mean, the mental illness is pretty bad by itself, and on top of that you add all the social stigma and ignorance and discrimination, and it's just wonderful. So yeah, and I especially felt like I wanted to make this video to share some tips and coping strategies that I think actually work, as opposed to some of the most popular coping strategies that you can find online or that you even hear from professionals. And I promised to myself that I'm not gonna talk shit about professionals in this video, but um, like I said, I am extremely disappointed by the way that BPD is currently treated by professionals. And some of these so-called coping strategies that people recommend are just, I just don't get it. Like, I don't get how you can possibly suggest to somebody who has a severe mental illness that sniffing some lavender oil is gonna make them feel better. Like, I don't get how you can take somebody who's having a panic attack and just suggest that they take a deep breath. Like, I don't get that, and I don't think that's effective. I don't think that's helping anyone. So yeah, I'm just gonna share what worked for me in my personal experience, and I hope that this video is helpful. I know that when I published my previous video where I talked about BPD and depression and all of that, some people wrote back to me saying that they actually found it to be very useful, either because they suffered from BPD or because they knew somebody who suffered from it. And I don't know, I just hope this is helpful, because in my personal experience it was really hard to come to terms with this, to find ways to live alongside this condition and still be productive and successful and to still be myself. And so let's start from that, from how this all began. So I was first diagnosed with BPD during my second year of college. I guess you could say that I was previously misdiagnosed with depression. My doctor thought that I just had some form of severe depression. And then during my second year of college, when I clearly wasn't getting any better and I was actually showing other symptoms on top of just being depressed, I was hospitalized. And this is actually something really funny, because the doctors at the hospital didn't even bother telling me that I suffered from BPD or explain to me what it was. The way that I found out that I had BPD was when they released me from the hospital and I came back home and they handed me this, my medical file basically, and I opened it and I read diagnosis borderline personality disorder. And my first reaction was, what is that? Like, I didn't know what it was. Nobody had bothered to explain this to me, and so, you know, my first reaction was like, what is this? Like, this is crazy. I don't have this. What the hell? And then when I looked it up and I read about it and read about the symptoms, I was like, oh my god, like, there's actually a name for this. Yeah, and so that was how I found out about this, and then later on when I met my doctor after I was discharged from the hospital and I told him about being diagnosed with BPD, he was kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. So I don't know. Yeah, so that's how I found out about this. And this was, like I said, my second year of college, so you can imagine just how fun the remaining years were. And just to clarify, I still managed to graduate magna cum laude with honors and to make the dean's list every single year. And if you're wondering how in the world I was able to do that while struggling with BPD, I honestly don't know. I wish I could answer that question, but I am not sure myself. I'm pretty shocked myself that I was able to do that, because I know that I was in a great deal of pain and that I wasn't getting any help at all. Like, I wasn't getting any type of support. I wasn't getting any type of help from so-called therapy, because I've seen something like 4 or 5 different therapists in the course of those years, and to be perfectly honest, most of them were just absolutely incompetent. They were just absolutely incompetent. They had no idea how to treat BPD. They didn't help me whatsoever, and I'm not trying to be bitter, I'm just trying to be honest. I honestly think that those professionals actually did more harm to me than good. And every time that my symptoms just got worse, they would either increase my medications or suggest that I go to the hospital for like a week, hoping that that would make me feel better. So yeah, definitely not the best experience, and I hope that's not the case with you people, because yeah, I mean, imagine being a full-time student in a different country, all on your own, no family, friends from school, I guess, but besides that, no support system whatsoever. And on top of that, you have absolutely incompetent therapists, and you know, you don't really know how this BPD thing works, because nobody ever cared to explain it to you. You know, you just have no knowledge whatsoever besides what you can read on the internet, and on top of that, you're trying to go to class, to work on your projects, work on your final, to work on your activities outside of class, because of course I was a film major, so basically the time that I wasn't spending in class, I was spending outside of class working on film sets. So you can imagine just how stressful all of that was. And on top of that, I wasn't even one of those, you know, rich white kids who came from Europe and they didn't have to worry about money whatsoever. My family isn't rich, so and I also had a part-time job to, you know, to try to you know, sustain myself financially as much as possible. So that's a lot of stress for somebody who's in their early 20s and they've just been diagnosed with fucking BPD. And again, I am quite shocked that I actually managed to go through all of that and to, you know, actually get better with time. It's just, it's really shocking. So, anyway, so therapy clearly didn't do much for me. Luckily, when I came back to Europe, I actually found the one doctor that seemed to actually know his profession and to be able to treat people the right way. I guess he did help me, although, um, I never stay in Europe for long these days. I moved to New York when I was 19, and basically I've spent the majority of the last, you know, um, 6 to 7 years of my life living in North America. So unfortunately, our treatment didn't last long, but I still think he was definitely the most competent doctor that I ever met. Therapy wasn't much of a viable choice for me. And like I said, due to my previous history of unsuccessful therapy, I wasn't particularly, looking forward to go through all of that again. So because therapy wasn't doing much for me, I had to sort of come up with my own way of dealing with my own problems, which is not easy at all. So the first thing that I do want to share is that probably the thing that helped me the most was to just read and study more about BPD as much as possible. And I'm talking BPD and other personality disorders because if you are familiar with this, with personality disorders in general, then you are aware that they are divided in different clusters, and then within the same cluster, some of the disorders can sometimes overlap, or they do have common features in common. So just to learn about all of this was really helpful to me to really understand, what this condition is, how it works, why it works the way it does. Even though it's not a very well researched disorder, and there's a lot of disagreement within the medical community about how it should be treated, about what it is caused by, and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, that was really helpful to me, especially learning about the neurobiology of the disorder, because as I believe some of you know, BPD is not just a purely psychological disorder, meaning that it has been proved that the brain of people suffering from BPD acts in a way that's different from the brain of a neurotypical person. And I believe the main areas that are affected by this are the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the amygdala, but I'm gonna put up some links and sources because I don't want to give out incorrect information. So it has been proven that some areas of the brain of people affected by BPD actually are underactive compared to those of people who do not have BPD, particularly the areas that are involved in processing emotions. And on the other hand, I think that some other areas, like I believe the amygdala, I am not 100% sure, so take my words with a grain of salt, but it has been proven that some other areas are, on the other hand, hyperactive, such as I believe the areas that manage emotional reactions, like immediate emotional reactions. So of course, that makes total sense if you're familiar with BPD and with the main symptoms of BPD. And I found this to be extremely useful to me because, as somebody with BPD, you may be inclined to really blame yourself for not making any progress and for, constantly getting into the same cycle, into the same loop of repeating the same mistakes or getting into the same, emotional status that you're trying to avoid. And it's really frustrating because your first reaction is, why is this happening again? Why am I not doing any better? Why isn't therapy working, and all of that? So you tend to really blame yourself, when in fact, the truth behind it is that this is actually something that has to do with the way that your brain works. And unfortunately, you cannot really change that, no matter how much therapy you do. And it's not even a problem in brain chemistry, such as bipolar and schizophrenia are, meaning that antipsychotics will not work on BPD. Yeah, it is extremely tricky, and it's something that can be traced back to different things. It's not just a psychological disorder, it's not just a psychotic type of disorder. So it's extremely complex, and that explains why people have had such a hard time just trying to figure out what it really is, what it originates from, and all of that. So, I just find reading about BPD and the medical research behind it just extremely useful. Because I don't know, I feel like a big part of dealing with BPD is being aware of what's happening to you and why it is happening. Meaning that when you get to a certain point where you're able to understand that you are having what I like to call a BPD moment, meaning that you are falling into that trap of thinking with your emotional mind as opposed to your rational mind. Whenever you're experiencing a symptom, it is very important to be aware that that is a symptom, as opposed to just believing that this is just something that you're feeling in the moment, and actually ending up feeding that feeling. And the more you feed it, the more it gets control over you, and the more you start believing that this is you and not the pathology, which of course it is. And so I think it's really important to be able to spot a symptom or a reaction that you're having because of your BPD, and not because this is actually how you feel and how your normal self would react, because that way you're at least aware that this is not the real you, that this is your pathology speaking and trying to act out. I guess I'm not really sure how to phrase this, because I have my own way of dealing with this, and I'm not sure that, well, like I said, there is no right way to cure BPD, so I guess my method is just as valid as others. But yeah, I guess I'm just gonna share what I personally do because it works for me, and I hope that it works for other people as well. So I find it really helpful to distinguish between the real me, meaning the rational me, the normal me, and the, extremely emotionally chaotic part of my brain that I identify as being my BPD, as being my emotional mind, and as being that part that constantly tries to, act up when it gets triggered and to take control of my rational mind. And and of course, sometimes even though you're aware of that, you're still gonna fall into that trap and just get overwhelmed with feelings, which unfortunately is just part of it. That's just part of BPD, and I know it sucks, and I know it is extremely painful. Yes, I have been there, and I know just how painful it is. And that explains why a lot of people with BPD turn to some very harmful coping strategies, such as substance abuse, self-harm. I guess some people also turn to physical aggressiveness towards others, which was never the case for me, but I don't know. And yeah, and of course I believe the statistics tell us that about 10% of people with BPD die of suicide. So yeah, it's extremely painful. sometimes unbearable. Um, and it's just really hard. I mean, it took me over 5 years to be able to get some degree of control over my BPD and to be able to more or less live normally. And I believe that like people who know me, who are not aware that I have BPD or don't even know what BPD is, they probably won't even notice that like that I have this mental disorder, because you know you try to not let it wreck your life, and it's hard, but honestly, I'm guessing that if I was able to do that, then there's a pretty good chance that you are able to do that as well. Because yes, I have been in a great deal of emotional pain. I have also been through what my friend who's a forensic psychologist refers to as a history of trauma, um, along with SI. That is another symptom that I particularly struggle with, especially nowadays, and so yeah, all fun stuff. And but I'm still somehow able to keep it together, I guess. And by the way, as I'm shooting this video, I'm also extremely jet lagged. Yeah, because I just flew in from Toronto a few days ago, and I'm still extremely jet lagged. So that's obviously, you know, that doesn't make your mental health any better. But I still think I'm doing pretty well. So yeah. Okay, so another really successful coping strategy for me was to be able to talk with other people who suffer from BPD or similar conditions, because it's just such a relief to be able to see that other people are in the same boat as you, that they experience the same exact symptoms, meaning that you are not actually crazy, that, you know, this is actually a mental condition. And just like for a physical condition, a person who suffers from the same condition will experience the same symptoms. For a mental condition, another person who suffers from the same condition will experience the same symptoms. So you know, it's just such a relief to see that, and to be able to, you know, talk to other people who have BPD, to be able to hear their stories, to be able to, you know, to just feel understood, and like you're not this crazy person that you sometimes really feel like you are, or that, you know, society wants to portray you as. You know, we've talked about stigma. You know, I feel like most people who do not have any knowledge of BPD or really any knowledge of mental illness in general, you know, if I were to tell them what kind of symptoms I experience, they would probably think that I'm crazy, which I am not, or at least I hope I am not, because, you know, other people with BPD have the same exact symptoms and yet they are not crazy. And they, you know, they struggle just as much as I do in order to fight those symptoms and to be able to live their lives. And you know, honestly, and this is gonna sound pretty bad, I think, but it also helps me to read stories about people who actually messed up worse than I did in my own life when they were having really bad BPD, because that kind of makes me feel like, oh, well, I guess I'm not that bad. Like I guess I'm actually have a pretty good chance of getting better, since, you know, I never did anything as nearly as bad as what that person did, which is of course not really nice, but nevertheless, you know, it makes you feel better. Like it just gives you hope. It makes you feel like you are not as bad as it's not as bad as it could get or as it could have been, and all of that. So next on my list is the fact that, you know, I feel like BPD is a condition that tends to confuse you and sort of distort your own sense of self, which is why it is a personality disorder, of course. So I find that something that really helps me is to get back to things that I really love and that I feel passionate about. But, and I know that this is something that, that some people or some therapists already advise, but what I mean is that you really need to find something that you are deeply passionate about, something that really makes you want to live and want to get better, because it has to be something so strong that you're willing to keep fighting and fighting in order to keep going. And I think it can be pretty hard for a person to figure that out. I was actually pretty lucky because I always knew what the great passion of my life was. I always knew what I wanted to do, and basically all my life, ever since I was 11, I have been working toward that goal, which unfortunately I haven't been able to reach yet, but you know, I'm still trying to. It's not an easy thing because being a filmmaker is not easy, especially when you don't come from within the industry. But nevertheless, making movies was just always something that just made me feel the happiest ever. Like, I don't think anything makes me feel as happy as when I am working on a movie, shooting a movie, or even just watching a great movie. That's just like, that is my personal passion, and that is something that um, I absolutely live for. That's my vocation, I guess. And so, going back to that, and I'll give you a concrete example. Um, Watching a really great film that reminds you of why you want to be a filmmaker, of why you got into this profession, of why you worked so hard in order to get there, is just a very precious reminder for me of, I guess, what I'm fighting for. And, it's a reminder of who I really am and of what I really want. And it just brings me back to a point where I feel like myself, like my real self, as opposed to, the chaotic self that my BPD wants me to be. Um, and so, yeah, it's just so strong and effective. And I hope that people who are watching this who suffer from BPD are able to find something similar, because, yeah, I guess it's probably the most powerful thing to to just love something so much that it reminds you of who you really are. Uh, so yeah, there's that. And I guess another aspect of that is that you also want to get better for people that you love and that love you, and who love you back. Although that's kind of a tricky thing to do, because if you're familiar with BPD, I'm guessing you know what an FP is, and I don't have to explain it to you. And just how messed up that is, and how it can twist your mind and twist your will, and just, it's another one of those things that can ruin your life if you're not too careful with it. And I believe that the concept of FP has a lot to do with projection, meaning that the person suffering from BPD projects a lot of positive feelings onto that specific person, to the point that they completely idealize them. And, of course, that's not a healthy relationship, that's not a healthy thing to do. And unfortunately, it's very hard to control for a person who has BPD, because I'll just remind you real quickly that a lot of medical literature assumes that BPD comes from childhood abuse and neglect. So it would make sense for somebody who had abusive or distant parents to want to be able to find a person that they can look up to and feel, protected by, and that, you know, somebody to sort of just replace that parental figure that you missed in your childhood, because that is just, you know, that's a part of you that you'll never get back. Like for people who were raised by abusive parents or distant parents or no parents at all, you know, that's just such a fundamental part of a human being, to be able to receive love and care as a child, that to not have that just really fucks you up. And yeah, unfortunately, it's not something that you will be able to ever recover if you never had that. But you know, unfortunately, for people who have had that experience, you need to find a way to fix that and still be happy and still feel like a complete person. And again, it's not easy, and again, it is very painful, and yeah, but you know, that's just how it is. You know, it's no use to just I don't know, get angry, which I still do, but you know, it's not used to get angry at something that you can't fix because it happened so long ago, and unless you have a time machine, you're not gonna be able to fix it. So yeah, I feel like I said most of what I wanted to say. I can't really think of anything else that I want to add right now, but if I do, or if you guys have any question, I might be able to make a second part to this video, especially if it somehow ends up helping some people, which I hope it does. And yeah, and I guess the last thing that I wanted to add is that a few years back, I think not that long ago after I was diagnosed with BPD, I stumbled across this TED Talk by a man called Aaron Stark, which is entitled, "I Was Almost a School Shooter." And every now and then I go back and watch that video, and every time it really breaks my heart, and I end up crying, and it's a very painful watch, but at the same time it's really useful, because this guy basically talks about his very difficult childhood and how he was abused and neglected by his parents, how he was bullied in school because he was overweight, how his family would move a lot, how there was a lot of domestic violence, how he got into self-harm at a very young age. And you know, most of it is something that I can really relate to, and that's why I guess I can feel his pain so much, and it hurts me as well every time that I watch it. And so anyway, he talks about how he was almost about to take all of this rage out on others by assaulting a school, but he didn't, because one of his friends just simply tried to help him and took care of him and made him feel human and made him feel cared for. And you know, sometimes that's really all you need, is just to feel like you're not a monster and that somebody does care about you. You know, I think it may sound like a platitude, but that's really what it all is. You know, it's really not that hard to just show empathy towards somebody, even if you think that even if, let's say, they have a severe mental disorder and you think that you don't know how to do that, that you don't know how to help them, just doing the simplest things can really help someone. And so I was just rewatching that last night, and I think what I like the most about Mr. Stark's story is that it makes me feel very human. Like, it makes me feel like like I am not somebody who is defined by what happened in their past. That, you know, somebody is not just defined by the trauma that they experienced, and that you can get over it and have a wonderful, successful, fulfilling life no matter what you went through. And yeah, so I highly recommend that you guys watch it. Yeah, so thank you for watching this. Let me know if you have any questions or any thoughts, and I hope that this was somehow helpful to those of you who are struggling out there. Again, I know the struggle and I know the pain, and yeah, so I wish you all the best, and thank you for watching.